Welcome to Mideast Focus from Jerusalem. I'm Tal Heinrich. A century ago, 20% of the population in the Middle East was Christian. Today, Christians account for only about 5% and their numbers are still dwindling. According to studies, Christians are now facing the worst religious persecution in over 1,000 years. So is there a future for the Christian community in the birthplace of Christianity? We will try to get answer to this question right after this week's headlines from the region.
مجرم تم إلقاء القبض عليه، صحة إلى المحاكمة طبعا، لكن أهل الشهيد يعتقدون أنه هاني الملقي شخصيا يتحمل المسؤولية.
What Russia is sponsoring and doing is not counterterrorism, it is barbarism.
عايزه ابني اشوفه حي او ميت. مانيش عايزه حاجه اكتر من كده، انا بقالنا 3 ايام مش عارفين حاجه.
The dire fate of the Christian community in the Middle East has recently become headline news. In 2011, it was estimated that by 2020, the number of Christians in the Middle East will be cut down to half, from 12 million to 6 million. Now, contributing to these statistics are the civil war in Syria, the rise of the Islamic State, and the turmoil in countries such as Iraq and Libya. But not only. Here's I-24 News' Lauren Isa with the gloomy picture of Christianity in the Middle East.
The Christians of the Middle East have a rich cultural heritage. It was they who first translated ancient Greek texts to Arabic, therefore bringing science and philosophy to Islam in its golden age, which in turn transmitted this culture of learning to Europe. There they continue to live side by side with Muslims and others, bringing a pluralism that is vital to peace in the region.
Among the various religions of the Middle East, there is no other religion that has had the kind of cultural, political, and economic impact than Christianity has.
100 years ago, 20% of North Africa and the Middle East was Christian. Today, Christians make up 4% of the population. Much of that decline has occurred in the last decade. In essence, Muslims are rendering North Africa and the Middle East free of Christians. Take Egypt, for example. In just the past 2 years, tens of thousands of Christian Copts have left Egypt, and many others want to leave. Why they want to leave is no mystery.
The current wave of violence in places like Egypt and Syria and Iraq, I think, is due to the increasing dominance of various forms of Islamist extremism, violent Islamist extremism. It is now targeting Christians in a vicious and violent way, with ISIS in Iraq, with the al-Nusra group in Syria and others.
Christians are being persecuted in Muslim countries because they are Christians, or as the Quran puts it, infidels. That is, non-Muslims who are regarded by many fundamentalist Muslims as inferior.
وصلوا للحقيقة بتاع الإسلام علشان نقدر نوصل لحرية حقيقية، لديمقراطية حقيقية. كل اللي بيتعاش النهاردة حتى بعد الثورة اللي مفيش حرية، مفيش ديمقراطية في مصر.
This is happening on the watch of all of us now, and so I think if something dramatically is not done, including prayer and mobilization and advocacy, you will see the Christian community emptied. And if that happens, that will not be good for Christianity, nor will it be good for anybody else in the world.
In early September, leaders from churches and Christian communities throughout the Middle East gathered in Amman, Jordan, for a 2-day conference on the challenges facing Arab Christians in the region. Stuart Isa Musalek, spokesperson of the Jerusalem Patriarchate, took part in this convention. الأب إيسا مصالح، شكرا جزيلا لتستضيفنا هون في البطريقة.
أهلا وسهلا فيكم دائما.
لماذا كان
So why was there an urgent need to gather such a convention? Is there a real sense of danger?
عند المسيحيين في المنطقة؟
طبعا كما تعلمين جيدا.
Well, as you know, this Middle East convention took place in Jordan. Jordan is an independent country, and it does not fear to host such a convention, so they invited 22 patriarchies and churches from the region to take part in it. And as you know, the situation of Christians in the Middle East is bad, and this convention unfolded in the shadow of these difficulties and challenges that the entire region is facing, and more particularly the ones concerning the Christian community. Thank God the convention was great and beneficial. Many new recommendations were decided upon over there. And as clerics, as the Patriarch, we hope to do everything we can in order to help Christians in the Middle East, especially due to what's going on now in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya, and in other places. We stand against violence, against killing, against blackmailing, against ethnic cleansing, and that's why we were convened in Jordan to make decisions in order to face the mass immigration of Christians from the Middle East, from the Holy Lands that we live on.
What did you discuss during these 2 days in Amman?
As you know, we discussed many subjects, but on top of everything were the concerns of Middle East Christians, the immigration and the displacement. The war that's taking place now is not humane. According to all religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, we call for peace, cooperation, and for making sacrifices for the benefit of all. The number of Christians is declining with every day that passes by, and this is a stain on our churches. Hopefully we can do something to change it from both the Islamic and Christian perspectives and express our goals and priorities. The first is helping the refugees who leave their countries from Iraq and Syria. We need to address their practical and spiritual needs. The Greek Orthodox Patriarch plays a big role in it, and so are the other churches that participated in the convention. Christians are an integral part of the Middle East. We have history in this region that we are proud of. We will raise our voices so that the entire world could hear and help us stop this violence and displacement and killings of children and innocent people. And we pray to God to bring light into people's hearts in the Middle East and in the rest of the world.
If you had to define the status of the Christians in Middle Eastern countries, how would you define it? Where is the best and worst place to be a Christian in this region?
In Syria and Iraq, the number of Christians is really low. We remember a short while ago, 2 priests were abducted from the Attakaya church. At the convention, we called the world to act in order to bring to their release from the ones who kidnapped them. Jordan is the best country when it comes to the Christian population, and I'm proud to say it. It's a symbol of safety and independence to the Christian world. This thanks to King Abdullah II, thanks to his government and the Jordanian people who play a big role in the decision of the Christian community in their country to stay. They do not make a difference between a mosque and a church. They say we are brothers and we have a common history, so we stay here together and equal. This is an example that these people, the Jordanian people, Muslim and Christians, can be proud of.
Last year, Pope Francis called the persecution of Christians in the Middle East a genocide. Do you think that it will ever stop, or should the Christians do what the Jews did in the last century, and that is to flee these countries?
This extremism is moving people out of their homes and countries. And we can say that if this war and atrocities continue, the way we witness them now in the Middle East, our churches will eventually turn into museums. And as you know, they do not make a judgment between a Muslim and a Christian. They are killing humanity. And I pray for God, the Almighty, that He will change this wave of extremism, and that we will return to more calm times, to love, peace and justice in the Middle East, and that we could all live together side by side in the whole world.
الأب اسم الصالح، شكرا جزيلا على هذه الكلمات المهمة.
شكرا.
Recent legislation proposed by the U.S. Congress suggests a very interesting and creative resolution to support the establishment of a safe haven for persecuted religious minorities, including Christians. In other words, the establishment of a non-Muslim country in the Nineveh Plains in Iraq. Now, to further hear about this idea, we're now joined from Nebraska by U.S. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, the author of this resolution. Thank you for joining us, sir.
A pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for your interest in this topic.
Is it a realistic plan to have non-Muslim minorities living all together in one place in the Nineveh Plain, which is so adjacent to Mosul, an ISIS stronghold? You know, there's a tiny Jewish state in this region, and it hasn't been warmly accepted since its day one.
It's a good question and the right question, but one that actually has a precedent as an answer. This area, the Nineveh Plain, has been traditionally the home of a diverse population of Christian Yazidis and others who have made up a rich tapestry of diversity there in the Middle East and northern Iraq. It has been a place where you have had mutual support, mutual trust, where minority populations have not felt as vulnerable as they have in the past. So this resolution is not actually demanding something that happens or is not an invention of mine. It is actually affirming what the Iraqi government has already called for in 2014 through their Council of Ministers, a specialized new province called the Nineveh Plain that would actually allow a right of return, the restoration of the population who used to live there, with security guarantees as well as the potential for revitalization.
How many people could live there? Which minorities?
Well, I wouldn't characterize this as a non-Muslim province. I would characterize this as a special area that deserves special protection because it has been a traditional home of diverse religious perspectives, including the Christians, Yazidis, Sunni Muslims, Shiite Muslims, and other religious traditions. The Nineveh Plain has specialized resources as well. If we don't do this, if we don't follow upon the Iraqi government's own call for this, you're going to lose the opportunity to restore what was once a rich area of diversity and which is so critical for the well-being of the entire Middle East, and particularly Iraq.
How was this plan conceived and how are you going to promote it? It will probably take more than a U.S. Congress support.
Well, again, after the genocide resolution was passed, I was pressed on international television as to what this means. There's no policy considerations in this regard. It's just a statement using a particular word. Well, what it means is it laid down a marker for, again, a gateway of other policy considerations. But the other thing I did do during those interviews, and I'll do it now, is when have you or anyone else in the international media, particularly in the Middle East, talked about the rights, the perspective, and the responsibilities that the rest of us have to religious minorities in the Middle East, again, who have contributed to the well-being of their societies, who have served as a refuge for other peoples when they were under persecution, who have tried to build bridges between various sects. This is particularly true in the Christian community, and the Middle East's well-being, I think, depends upon the possibility of a Christian community contribution to governance and culture as well as economic vitality in the future. I represent, by the way, the largest number of Yazidis in America. They have settled in my hometown of Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm proud of that fact. I'll tell you, when we passed a genocide resolution, a gentleman came to see me in my office. In fact, he had been in the gallery of the House of Representatives watching my speech. He's a Yazidi man who traveled back to Sinjar once the area was cleared to see what had happened to his community. He lived next door to a Christian church which was in rubble. And he took it upon himself to make a cross, a Christian cross, fashioned out of wood, just basic wood, and planted it on that pile of rubble, saying to me, "These were my brothers. These were my neighbors." He stood in solidarity with their suffering. This is the example that the Middle East needs, and this is the example of an area that, again, upheld these values, which are universal values.
Do you think that the Middle East has gotten to a point in which Christians no longer have a future in this region? Is the only alternative to a sovereign country for minorities is actually to flee this region?
We do open our arms to those who need to flee, who are under severe persecution. But the reality is, if we can create safe places for people who still have to relocate particularly in a Nineveh Plain area or in areas of the Middle East, who are proximate to their ancient homeland, so that once there is a proper cultural, economic, and most importantly, political settlement that actually upholds the rights of Christians and Yazidis and others as important components of flourishing society, then these people will be positioned to more easily return to their ancient land. That's the other purpose of creating stabilized areas that are particularly protective of minorities, because it creates safe space for those who do not wish to leave the Middle East, who shouldn't necessarily have to leave the Middle East in order to reclaim their ancient home once there is some type of political settlement, hopefully quickly in Iraq, hopefully through some miracle in Syria as well.
Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you so much.
And that is all from Middle East Focus for this week from Jerusalem. Thank you for being with us, and see you again soon. Next week, we'll be back with more stories from the region.